Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. This is the post-fight review for the Otto Wallin and Travis Kauffman fight, and also at the end of the video I'll just have a couple of quick thoughts on the Christian Thun vs Jason Bergman fight. They're both fights in America, but we'll start with the Wallin and Kauffman fight, which was on the undercard of the David Benavidez and Roma Angulo card. So this one went 5 rounds and it ultimately ended in a stoppage for Wallin, but it was because the referee had to jump in. Travis Kauffman injuring himself, unable to defend himself. The referee had seen enough, didn't want to, and you can see here on screen this is the ending of it. Kauffman had thrown a punch a little bit earlier in the round, quite a wide arcing punch. Here it is on screen, a screenshot of it, and after that he backs up, turns away and winces, and you could tell something was wrong. Initially I thought, perhaps is it a body shot that had sort of got through and hurt him, but it became pretty clear with his left arm sort of dragging down by his side that he couldn't sort of really use his arm, couldn't defend himself, and it was all over within another minute or so. So overall, Otto Wallin, it was a solid effort, and we'll go through a little bit of the action, but he certainly, after the year-long absence out of the ring, he looked a little bit rusty early on. It was pretty competitive for the first couple of rounds, and he started to get more into a groove and into a rhythm from round 3, but that also coincided with Travis Kauffman, you know, starting to gas. He was looking pretty tired. He was really sucking in the big ones after round 2, but the first couple of rounds, ultra competitive. But Otto Wallin for the first round doing what many of us would have expected. He was using movement, he was utilizing the jab, and the jab was a huge punch for him in this fight. So in the 5 rounds he landed over 60, and I think after round 4 he was 50-something jabs, and Kauffman was really sort of getting targeted, especially after round 3. But he was working off the jab, and as the fight wore on, he was starting to mix in other shots, use more angles, throwing a lot of good body shots. That was a feature of the fight too. Here is a still shot of one of them landing on Kauffman, and you could see it was starting to sap Kauffman too. But in round 2 and a little bit in round 3, Kauffman was having some spots of success, bailing Otto Wallin up onto the ropes and, you know, sort of unloading, managing to get a few shots to the body and head, but it was limited success for Travis Kauffman, who ultimately wasn't really using his jab. He was just looking for big shots, right hands in particular, but failing to find the target for the most part. And it was quite interesting because Otto Wallin, one of the sort of hangovers from that fight with Tyson Fury, a lot of people think that Otto Wallin is a dirty fighter. Obviously, he was thumbing that cut that he opened up on Fury in that fight. And there was a few spots where he was sort of getting away with a few things, but the ref ultimately catching up with him. In particular, he was holding Kauffman's neck and then swinging. He did that a number of times. He was warned a number of times and was put onto a final warning. And there was also another spot where he was holding Kauffman's head and sort of unloading. So yeah, I think a few people will be looking at Otto Wallin and the way that he fights and still considering him a little bit dirty, but I guess, you know, it is what it is, and the referee is there to do a job. And in this case, he was warning Otto Wallin, who put him onto a final warning. And from that point onwards, Otto Wallin started to work a bit more from the outside, which naturally in most of his fights he has done, you know, working at range, popping the jab and sort of working off that. And he was starting to land a lot of hooks, a lot of shots to the body. Uppercuts were starting to get worked in from the 3rd round onwards. And Kauffman's conditioning clearly started to let him down. And obviously by the 5th round, you know, he was actually starting to really get peppered with a lot of shots. Wallin in this fight landed over 50% of his power shots, which is a huge number. So for the most part, Otto Wallin did his job, but he did look a bit rusty, and it was a case of, I don't think it was a sparkling performance by any stretch, but from round 3, as he started to find a rhythm, certainly in spots he looked quite good, but then at other times, especially earlier in the fight, he looked a little bit sort of listless, and especially trying to get off the ropes when he was getting bailed up there. He didn't really seem to have too much of an answer for Travis Kauffman in the spots where Kauffman was sort of getting in and having success, but he is an outboxer for the most part. But the jab, it was a good punch for him. him. As I mentioned, it was a feature of the fight. Body punching was really good too. And overall, he did his job. His corner actually said, this is Joey Gamasha's trainer after round 4, something to the effect of, look, you need to show your fighting skills here. And the message was clear that he needed to go in there and showcase himself, what he could do, his abilities, because this was effectively against Travis Kauffman a showcase fight. But on the strength of this performance, I don't think anyone in the top 10 or top 20 will be quaking in their boots or anything like that. He looked okay, but nothing more. It wasn't exactly the sort of performance where you thought, wow, Otto Wallin just went in there and simply outclassed him. It was a bit of a slow burn. He started to have more success as the fight wore on, but as I mentioned, that sort of coincided with Kauffman starting to fade, and Kauffman is a durable, tough guy who's a bit limited. And he did try to, this is Kauffman, mix it up in the fight, turning southpaw. A little bit of success, but ultimately, most of what he did didn't really pay off to any real extent. So the what next is going to be interesting for both guys. And if we start with Kauffman, the broadcast actually said he said ahead of this fight that he was going to, if he lost what would be a second fight in a row, this one with Otto Wallin, he was going to retire. So perhaps we've seen the last of Travis Kauffman, and with his shoulder injury, which is the shoulder that he's previously injured before and had surgery on after the Luis Ortiz fight, which he went into injured apparently. He had surgery. So that was part of the reason he's been out for the best part of 18 months or so. And for Otto Wallin, I think they will look to try to showcase him again if there are no fights that are out there that make sense, because clearly they've been trying to sort of cash in as a sort of lucrative B-side after his performance over Tyson Fury. So it remains to be seen what will happen. I mean, I think he should actually have a fight with one of his stablemates, Jermaine Franklin or Abdi Dovtaev, something like that, because if the fights aren't out there, and especially in the pandemic, sort of money you're wanting may not be there. You've already got some in-house fights that you can make and probably have on more Showtime cards. So it'll be interesting to see what Dimitri Salita does with Otto Wallin in the next sort of 6 months or so, because I don't think it's going to be good for him if he has another year out. Clearly, there was a degree of rust that he was shaking off with this fight. He looked okay. It wasn't fantastic by any stretch, but behind the jab and the variation of punches was good, and he sort of warmed into the fight as it went along. So there were some positives, but it wasn't exactly the sort of fight I'm sure that he would have wanted in terms of, an announcement, a re-announcement to the heavyweight division. Look, I'm here and I've done this job on Travis Kauffman. It was solid, it was workmanlike, but probably nothing more. It wasn't exactly the sort of performance that he was hoping to have ahead of this fight, where he sort of stated he needed to really go in there and look good. I think he looked okay and nothing more, as I said. But moving on to another fight that was held elsewhere in the United States. This was in Daytona. Christian Thun, the German prospect who's less than 5 fights on the ledger, going into this one against Jason Bergman. Bergman, a tough, durable journeyman who's been in with a number of good fighters, especially prospects in recent years. I think Joseph Parker about 4 or 5 years ago. Another one was Aslanbek Makhmadov in 2019. He was pretty much dominated from the get-go from the 6'9" Christian Thun, who had him down in the 4th round, and ultimately it was stopped not too long after that. Bergman not answering between rounds, giving Thun the victory. So Christian Thun, one to watch, 6'9". It'll be interesting to see what sort of promotional push he can get. That was his first fight under his new promoter, Universum. So he was fighting on that card, which was in Daytona, which was co-promoted by Christy Martin, the former female boxer. But he needs to get out there a bit sooner than he's had stretches of inactivity. He needs to really get cracking now. He is a talent to watch. But what did you make of it all? If you didn't catch the Thun fight, I will leave a link in the description box to the live stream link, which hopefully there's a replay, but also the Wallin fight. Were you impressed with what he did? Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.